The year ahead's going to be tough for retail. It's a big issue, Brexit, and it's the elephant in the room in a sense, in a retail perspective, because not only does it affect the wider retail sector from the perspective of the macroeconomy, consumer confidence is lower as a result of it, footfall's dropped in shops. Overall, I would say that it's a stigma that retailers are having to battle. They're hedging, they're trying to reduce costs as much as possible. So the three things that I would sort of suggest would be Brexit is a key issue and focus, the CVAs and administrations in the sector, retailers closing stores, and also, I guess, a shift from physical to online, and that's continuing. It's actually online sales that are winning, not so much physical, and it's about sort of how you combat that as a retailer. I think many retailers are seeking to cut costs across the board, and they're doing it through looking at payroll, headcount reduction, supply chain optimization, but as well as that, the physical property estate. And the way of doing that, I guess, is to go back to landlords and say, look, it's a tough market, our sales are declining, therefore you need to share, in that. House of Fraser, a good example. They've gone to landlords to see if that would work. I would say they're a bad example of it though, because rent-to-sales ratios for House of Fraser are 3 or 4% of sales, let's say, on average. The same for M&S and the same for all the big department stores, because landlords, can't charge them too much for rent because they're the anchor store. The department store sector in its relevancy is certainly a key question right now in the UK. And if you look to the US to see sort of, it's obviously a leading indicator of what happens here. Typically, what happens in the US tends to happen here eventually. We've seen Macy's, Sears, and a number of other department stores close, not just tens of stores, but hundreds of stores. I would say that when these retailers are coming to the UK, they're looking for principal markets. They're looking for the West End, they're looking for the big shopping malls, and they're looking for the big cities. They're not looking for secondary and tertiary locations. And so that essentially means that the department store chains are suffering from that structural decline or polarization and shift to the bigger centres getting better and the smaller centres getting weaker. Well, the shopping centre model is an interesting one because it's definitely, again, a case of bigger versus smaller centres. The big malls are outperforming, the rents are still high and increasing. I'm talking about Westfield London, Westfield Stratford, Bluewater, Trafford Centre, Metro Centre. These malls operated typically by a shrinking set of businesses, actually, in the case of the consolidation of Intu and Hammerson and Westfield and Unibail. There's a big difference between that, though, and, small centres around the UK that are seeing structural decline, increased vacancy rates and lowering rents. And even when we're not seeing lowering rents, we're actually seeing lowering property costs for retailers. In terms of retail warehouse parks, though, that's an interesting one because most of the investment that's gone into property recently has been in retail warehouse parks. And the parks that are performing best are fashion parks typically, because that's where the retailers want to be, especially in the fashion sector. I can't see the combined Hammerson Intu portfolio or the combined Westfield Unibail portfolio staying in its current state. Westfield's mission statement, is to have big shopping centres in capital cities. I think Hammerson have a very solid estate, and so the potential for them to drop out of the FTSE is still not going to change a good performance overall on a like-for-like basis and footfall increasing. So to lump Hammerson in with all the other centres in the UK is a mistake because they have some good centres. And I think that's the sort of base nature of the investor market in a sense. They're just saying, okay, retail, property, yeah, not so sure. But actually, they need to look at the fundamentals of the portfolio and then make a judgment on that basis. But it just doesn't work like that.